I'm Ava Morgan. I'm 31. And last weekend, my family sat me at the kids' table during my own brother's wedding. Right between a 10-year-old with grape juice on his tie and my cousin's daughter who was learning how to use a spoon. I wasn't late. I wasn't underdressed. And I sure as hell wasn't laughing. I looked at that tiny folding chair and that plastic plate, and I just knew. This wasn't an oversight. It was a message. And 5 minutes later, I took the mic and said something that changed everything. At first, I just sat there, frozen. Not because I didn't have the strength to get up, but because the realization hit harder than I expected. After everything I'd done to rebuild my life. After cutting through years of emotional neglect and carving out my own success. This was still how they saw me. A leftover. A misfit. A side character at my brother's big day. I scanned the room. There was my mom, laughing with the groom's new in-laws. Her hand wrapped around a glass of white wine, like nothing had happened. My dad. Leaning back like a retired king, as if this wedding were a coronation, for their real child. And my brother, Ryan. Front and center, basking in every ounce of attention. He didn't even glance my way. That's when something in me cracked. Not in a messy, crying in the bathroom kind of way. No. I stood up slowly, smoothed the fabric of my dress, and looked toward the mic. The MC had just said, "Anyone else want to say a few words?" And I swear, I didn't plan what came next. I just knew, I wasn't going to let this moment pass. Not this time. You'd probably assume this was some last-minute mistake. Like maybe the seating chart got mixed up. But, it wasn't. This had been building for decades. Growing up in the Morgan house meant one thing: Ryan was the son, and the rest of us. Just background noise orbiting around him. I was the older sister, but somehow always made to feel smaller. He got the big birthday parties. The surprise gifts. The loud applause for doing the bare minimum. Me? Straight A's got a head nod. Winning regional debate got a, "That's nice, but don't rub it in." My mom used to joke, "You were just born more independent." Which really meant, we won't be investing in you emotionally. Please parent yourself. My dad. The king of passive support. He'd say things like, "That's just how your mother is." As if that explained why I got silence for achievements. And criticism for simply existing too loudly. Even holidays had a pattern. Ryan got praise for showing up. I got guilt-tripped for asking if we could take turns hosting. And somehow, I still kept trying. Still kept hoping they'd notice me, care, show up. Spoiler. They didn't. And sitting at that kid's table. That wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a reminder. No matter how much I'd grown, in their eyes, I hadn't changed. But that was about to change for them. My mom, Celeste, has always been. What's the word? Curated. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't forget birthdays. She's the kind of woman who keeps handwritten thank you cards in a drawer, just in case. But behind that perfectly composed image is a master manipulator. Not the scream-in-your-face kind. The undermine-you-in-smiles kind. Growing up, she'd say things like, "Ryan needs more attention, he's sensitive. You're strong, Ava. You don't need all that fluff." And I believed her. I believed her when she didn't come to my school play because Ryan had a big test the next day. I believed her when she told me college debt builds character, right after they paid for his tuition in full. I even believed her when she told my relatives Ava likes to do her own thing. She's not really the family type. She didn't just play favorites, she rewrote the entire narrative to make it seem normal. Like it was my fault I wasn't the chosen one. Like being excluded was something I preferred. But the wedding? That was her final brushstroke on a painting she'd been working on my whole life. Sitting me at the kids' table wasn't random. It was precise. Planned. Another, harmless little detail, she could later laugh off. Except this time, she had underestimated just how much I'd grown. And this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly. My dad, Leonard, was always harder to read. Not because he was mysterious. But because he made invisibility into a lifestyle. He wasn't loud. He wasn't mean. He just wasn't there. Not physically, he was around. He grilled steaks on Sundays. He paid bills on time. He nodded a lot and said, "That's just your mother being your mother." And every time I cried about something. A cruel comment, a missed event, a forgotten milestone. He'd shrug and say, "Ava, don't take everything so personally." But silence is personal. When someone sees you hurting and says nothing. That's a choice. And he made that choice my whole life. He let my mom bulldoze my boundaries. He let Ryan be the golden child. And when I started pulling away in my 20s, missing family dinners, skipping holidays. He called it a phase. Told people I was finding myself. Never once asked what I needed, or why I felt like I didn't belong. So when I stood in that wedding hall, staring at the tiny chair with my name tag next to a juice box, I didn't just see a table. I saw years of neglect disguised as neutrality. Years of keeping the peace that only ever protected one side. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one who stayed quiet to keep things easy. And then there was Ryan. The golden boy. The pride of the Morgan household. The one who could have gone pro, even though he quit soccer sophomore year. If I got a B+, it was, "You need to focus." If Ryan failed a class, it was, "The teacher's probably just not inspiring him." He was the charismatic one. The visionary. The big personality, who meant well even when he wrecked 2 cars and forgot mom's birthday. When I got my first apartment at 20, working 2 jobs to pay rent, Ryan moved back home and had his room repainted and upgraded like a hotel suite. When I got promoted at work, Mom said, "Don't flaunt it in front of Ryan. He's still figuring things out." He never asked about my life. Never said congrats. But I always showed up for his, because that's what I was trained to do. So when I got the wedding invite, I wasn't surprised to find I wasn't in the bridal party. Not shocked that I wasn't asked to help plan or give a toast. But sitting me at the kids' table. That was new. That was bold. And he didn't even flinch. Didn't look over. Didn't text. Didn't notice. Maybe because when the whole world tells you you're special, you stop seeing the people around you. But I was done being invisible. And Ryan was about to hear my voice, clearly, for the first time in his life. Looking back, the signs were all there. The group chats I wasn't added to. The planning dinners I wasn't invited to. The dress code memo that arrived a full 2 weeks late, almost like an afterthought. When I asked my mom if she needed help with anything, she said, "Oh sweetheart, the bridesmaids have it handled. Just show up and look pretty." That stung. Not because I needed to be in the spotlight, but because I knew I'd once again been assigned my role. Audience. Not participant. Even the seating chart had been sent around for approval, in a thread I only heard about later from a cousin. I wasn't in the wedding party. Wasn't asked to give a speech. Didn't even get a hotel room comp like Ryan's friends from college. It was like someone had gone out of their way to erase me from the story. While still insisting I show support with a smile. And like always, I bit my tongue. Bought a dress. Wrapped a gift. Brushed off the snub as, just wedding stress. But that chair. At that table. That wasn't an oversight. It was a statement, loud and clear. You don't belong here, Ava. You never really did. And if that's what they wanted to communicate, then it was only fair I used my voice, too. I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, running my fingers down the side of my navy blue dress, wondering if I was overdoing it. It was a soft satin wrap, tailored but not loud. Classic, tasteful, not trying to outshine the bride or anything. The dress code on the invite said, formal cocktail attire. But when I got to the venue, it was like stepping into some alternate reality where that rule didn't apply to everyone. My cousin Maddie wore white lace. Yes, white, at a wedding. And no one blinked. One of Ryan's old frat buddies had a paisley tie and dirty sneakers. My uncle wore khakis. But me? The minute I walked in, I felt the eyes. Not admiration. Judgment. Mom pulled me aside near the hors d'oeuvres and said, "You didn't need to go so formal, Ava. You don't want people thinking you're trying to stand out." Stand out? I'd barely been included. It wasn't about the dress. It was never about the dress. It was the unspoken rule they'd always had for me. Don't make us uncomfortable by existing fully. Stay neutral. Stay small. Stay out of the picture unless we need you to applaud someone else. But this time, I wasn't going to shrink. I wore that dress like armor. Because by the end of the night, I wasn't just going to be seen. I was going to be heard. I walked into the reception hall alone. Jessica, my partner, couldn't make it. Her mother had surgery the night before. So it was just me. And honestly, that felt symbolic. The room was stunning. String lights wrapped around wooden beams, gold accents on every table. And a soft jazz trio playing near the bar. I paused by the seating chart, scanning for my name. Half hoping I'd see it near some cousins or old friends. But there it was. Ava Morgan, table 19. I followed the little decorative sign, past the bar. Past the rows of white-draped round tables filled with champagne glasses and candlelight. And then I saw it. Table 19. It wasn't even a real table. Just a folding rectangle tucked in the back corner, covered in a plastic tablecloth with cartoon animals on it. No joke, cartoon animals. Crayons. Chicken fingers. Juice boxes. Surrounded by kids aged 6 to 12, half of whom I didn't even know. The other half, busy throwing bread rolls at each other. And in the center of it all, my place card. Perfect cursive. Right between Liam, age 10, and Caitlin, age 8. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I stood there for a full minute, just staring, waiting for someone to come over and laugh and say, "Oops. Wrong table, let me fix that." But no one came. They knew exactly where they'd put me. And they wanted me to sit in it. So I did. Just for a moment. Long enough to feel the weight of every slight. Every dismissal. Every time they asked me to dim my light so Ryan could shine brighter. And then I stood up. And walked toward the mic. As I stood up from that kid's table, my chair gave off this loud, awkward scrape that made 3 toddlers look up in confusion. One even asked, "Are you someone's mom?" I didn't answer. I straightened my back, took a deep breath, and looked around. And that's when I saw it. The smirks. My Aunt Denise nudging her sister with a look that said, "Here comes the drama." One of the groomsmen chuckled, glancing over like he was watching a reality show. Even the wedding photographer caught my eye, and quickly looked away. But the real kicker. My mom. glass of champagne in hand, already leaning into my dad's shoulder. She caught my gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't wave me over. Just sipped her drink and turned away. Like she hadn't just orchestrated one of the most humiliating moments of my life. And Ryan? He was deep in conversation with one of his old college roommates, laughing. Big, booming laughter. Oblivious. Or maybe willfully blind. No one stopped me. No one pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I was alone in a room full of people I was related to. That kind of loneliness hits different. But I wasn't crying. Wasn't shaking. Something inside me had gone quiet. Still. Like a flame narrowing into a single, focused point. And I walked, calmly, deliberately, straight toward the microphone. Because if they were going to seat me like a side character, they were about to find out I'd been the main one all along. Halfway to the mic, I passed table 4, right by the dance floor. That's where I saw her. Jenna. My cousin. Same age as me. Didn't even finish college. Still lives at home. Once called me weird for bringing a book to a barbecue. And yet, there she was. Perched in a velvet chair, sipping Prosecco, sitting with the bride's sister, 2 uncles, and Ryan's best man. Her place card gleamed like it belonged there. She looked up, caught my eye. And smiled that pity smile. The kind you give to someone when you know you've won something you didn't earn. That's when it hit me. It wasn't an accident. They hadn't just forgotten to seat me properly. They had deliberately placed me where they thought I belonged. With crayons and chicken nuggets and juice boxes. Not because I wasn't worthy. But because acknowledging me would mean admitting that I had outgrown the little box they had built for me. Seeing Jenna in that chair felt like the final twist of the knife. The kind of quiet betrayal that says, everyone else here is an adult. You're still background noise. So I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I kept walking. And when I reached the mic, I smiled. Not because I was happy. But because I was finally, ready to burn the script they'd written for me. My fingers brushed the mic. Cool metal. The kind that hums with tension before a truth bomb drops. But before I spoke, a reel started playing in my mind. Not of happy memories. But of every moment I'd swallowed my pride in that family. Like when I won a regional art competition in high school. And my mom said, "That's sweet, but maybe focus on something practical like Ryan's robotics club." Or when I spent my entire summer working 2 jobs to afford college textbooks. While Ryan's were bought automatically, with a note that said, "Your future matters to us." There was the time I broke up with my first girlfriend and called home crying. And my mom said, "You're just confused. Maybe keep that part of your life private." And when I bought my first car, used, with a dent in the side, my dad said, "Hope it lasts. Ryan just got a new one. His job is really taking off." They never said, "We're proud of you." Only, "Don't get ahead of yourself." Every milestone I crossed was either ignored or repackaged as a cautionary tale about being too independent. And every time I bit my tongue, every time I dimmed my light, every time I told myself, they just don't know better, it led me to this moment. To that chair. At that table. With the kids. But I wasn't a child anymore. And I wasn't here to be quiet. Just before I reached the mic stand. Like fate needed to toss in one last match. A waiter passed by, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. I reached for one. He paused. Looked at me. Then tilted the tray away. "Oh, sorry," he said with a polite smile. This tray's for the adult tables only. We have juice boxes over at 19. Table 19. That number hit me like a slap. I just blinked at him, too stunned to speak. The waiter looked confused. Embarrassed, even. But moved on. And that was it. That was the moment. The last ounce of restraint in my body snapped clean. Because this wasn't just a seating arrangement. This was a message, broadcast loud and clear. We don't see you. We don't value you. You're here, but you're not one of us. They didn't just sit me at the wrong table. They put me back in my place. The place they'd carved out for me since childhood. Only this time. I wasn't going to sit quietly and sip juice. I stepped up to the mic. Looked out at the room full of champagne and polite smiles and curated silence. And said, "Hi, everyone. I wasn't planning to speak today. But since I'm apparently sitting at the kids' table, maybe it's time that the child said something." There was a pause. Not the kind that invites applause. But the kind that makes people hold their breath. Forks stopped midair. Chairs creaked. A ripple of confused laughter ran through the room. From the head table, Ryan finally looked up. His grin faltered. And for once, he didn't have anything clever to say. I could see my mother stiffen. Her smile twitched. She leaned toward my father, whispering behind her hand like that would stop the room from hearing the tension crackle. I didn't rush. Didn't raise my voice. I let the silence settle. Then I smiled, just enough to unnerve them. I just wanted to say congratulations, Ryan and Eliza. My brother nodded slowly, the smile trying to return to his face. Not realizing I hadn't even warmed up yet. Beautiful wedding. Stunning decor. The adults-only champagne. Very classy touch. A few people chuckled, awkwardly. The MC shifted in his seat. The photographer actually stopped mid-snap. I have to admit, when I saw my name at table 19, next to a juice box and a set of crayons, I thought it was a mistake. But then I realized, no. It was just a reminder. I glanced toward my mother. She looked away. A reminder that no matter what I've done, no matter what I've built or who I've become, some people in this room will always see me as less. Now the silence was different. Still heavy. But hanging on every word. So thank you, table 19. You didn't embarrass me. You reminded me why I've fought so hard to be exactly who I am today. I could feel the tension shift in the room. People weren't eating anymore. They were listening. Even the DJ stopped adjusting the playlist. It was like the wedding paused mid-frame. I let the quiet stretch for just a second longer. Then leaned into the mic, voice still steady. You know, growing up, I used to think something was wrong with me. That maybe I was too sensitive. Too loud. Too me. I glanced around, at aunts who never invited me to brunch. At cousins who never asked about my job. At Ryan, whose jaw was slowly tensing like he'd finally realized this wasn't going to be a sweet toast. But now I get it. It wasn't me. It was a system, built quietly, politely, where one child shines. And the other learns to clap from the shadows. That line landed. I saw someone near the back whisper. Someone else shift uncomfortably in their seat. I've worked hard for my life. My career. My independence. I don't need recognition. But I do deserve respect. Then I turned my head slowly, straight toward my parents. And respect isn't passive-aggressively sitting your daughter with a table of 10-year-olds. After years of treating her like a placeholder instead of a person. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father folded his hands in his lap, his gaze fixed on the centerpiece in front of him. They didn't interrupt. Because deep down, they knew I wasn't wrong. I took a breath. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted them to feel every word that followed. You didn't just seat me at the kids' table today. You've been seating me there my entire life. A quiet gasp rippled through the crowd. Asterisk every time you told me to tone it down. To keep things private. To not make a scene when I was hurt or overlooked. You were really saying, sit down, Ava. Don't make us uncomfortable. I saw Ryan's new wife, Eliza, shift awkwardly at the head table. She didn't look angry. She looked sad. Like she was watching a car crash happen in slow motion, one she hadn't signed up for. And yet I kept showing up. I came to birthdays where my name was left off the cake. To family dinners where no one asked how I was doing. To holidays where I brought gifts and left with silence. I turned my attention briefly to Ryan. And you, my golden boy brother. You never saw it. Or maybe you did, and just chose not to care. He looked like he wanted to speak, open his mouth, say something clever. But he didn't. Because there's no quick comeback for truth. You got the attention. The spotlight. The benefit of the doubt. And somehow, it still wasn't enough. Because I was never allowed to simply exist without being diminished. I stepped back from the mic for a beat. Let it land. Let the silence settle like dust in sunlight. This wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about ruining a wedding. This was about truth. The kind that no one in my family ever had the courage to say out loud. Until now. I leaned slightly forward. And since no one else seems to want to say it out loud, I pointed gently across the room, toward the corner where table 19 still sat. Half-eaten chicken nuggets and crumpled napkins in full view. That's where they sat me. Over there. With the kids. Next to a fourth grader who spent 20 minutes explaining Minecraft to me. A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through a few guests. Most just looked down. And look, those kids were sweet. They were polite. Honestly, they made more eye contact than half the people in this room ever have. A few people smiled nervously. But I wasn't done. But here's what that table meant. I raised my hand, just slightly, for emphasis. It meant. You don't matter enough to sit with adults. You're here, but only on our terms. Know your place. My voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. It cut. Because it was measured. Because it was true. You could have put me anywhere. At a cousin's table. With my college friends. At a seat that simply said. You belong here too. But you didn't. I turned back to my parents. They weren't hiding anymore. They were staring straight ahead, as if bracing for impact. That table wasn't an accident. It was the most honest thing you've ever said to me. You could feel it. The energy in the room shifting. No more awkward laughter. No more clinking glasses or whispered side comments. Just silence. And stares. Not all judgmental. Some stunned. Some, knowing. I caught my Aunt Melissa wiping the corner of her eye. She'd never said a word to me growing up. But in that moment, her face said everything. Across the room, one of Ryan's old college friends whispered something to his girlfriend. She looked at him, mouth slightly open, and shook her head. The photographer lowered his camera. Just watched. And my cousin Darren, the only one who ever treated me like a real person, gave me this tiny, imperceptible nod from the back. That's when I realized. I wasn't the only one who saw it now. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making this up. They had just never expected I'd say it out loud. I turned slightly, so everyone could hear, not just my parents. This isn't about ruining a wedding. It's about refusing to disappear. My voice stayed calm, but the words, they cracked through the air like lightning. You don't get to silence someone their whole life. Then act shocked when they finally speak. I let the silence breathe again. Not to be dramatic, but because I wanted every word I said next to land without echo. You want to know what hurts the most? I looked straight at Ryan. It's not the table. It's not the years of being dismissed. Or the jokes about how I'm too intense or too emotional. He looked frozen, like a statue in a suit. Like a groom realizing the party had just turned into something else entirely. It's knowing I bent over backwards to be part of this family. And all I ever got in return was the feeling that I was always just too much. Too different. Too inconvenient to love out loud. Someone near the back gasped softly. I kept going. And you know what? Maybe I am too much. Too independent. Too outspoken. Too unwilling to sit quietly while you serve your golden child another slice of praise. I turned to my mother, then my father. You taught me silence. You taught me to keep my achievements small and my disappointments quieter. But I've unlearned all that now. The crowd was silent. Still. And for once, I wasn't afraid of their silence. So this little moment at the mic. This is for every version of me you tried to shrink. For every dinner where you cut me off. For every time you looked past me. I let that sit. Let them feel it. I'm done asking for a seat at your table. Because from now on, I build my own. And with that, I handed the mic back. Didn't drop it. Didn't storm off. I walked, shoulders straight, head high. Past the stunned silence. Past the champagne flutes. Past table 19. And out the front door. Just before I reached the exit, something tugged at me. Not anger. Not drama. Decency. So I turned back, one last time. Not to my parents. Not to Ryan. But to Eliza. She was still seated at the head table. Hands folded tightly in her lap. Eyes wide with that deer-in-the-headlights stillness. She wasn't the villain in this. She hadn't built the system. Just married into it. So I walked back, halfway across the floor. And caught her eyes. Eliza, I said, soft but clear. None of this was about you. A visible breath escaped her lips. You've been kind to me since day one. And I really, truly hope your marriage is everything you want it to be. She gave a small, stunned nod. Then mouthed, thank you. And that moment, that small flicker of respect between two women. In a room full of dysfunction. That meant something. Because in a night full of people pretending. She didn't look away. And I left knowing that not everything in that room was broken. Just the parts I'd finally decided to stop carrying. I didn't slam the doors. Didn't storm out in tears. Didn't need a dramatic soundtrack behind me. I just walked. Down the reception hall. Past the guests still frozen in their chairs. Past the servers now unsure whether to keep pouring drinks or start clearing plates. I could feel the weight of every stare on my back. The stunned silence behind me. But I didn't look back. Because I wasn't leaving in shame. I was leaving free. For the first time in years. I wasn't carrying their approval like it was oxygen. I wasn't hoping they'd come chasing after me. I wasn't aching to be understood. I had said what needed to be said. And whether they liked it, hated it, or spent the rest of the night pretending it didn't happen, wasn't my burden anymore. Outside, the air hit my face like a reset button. Cool. Clean. Undeniably real. I walked to my car. Slid into the driver's seat. And just sat there for a moment. No music. No tears. Just a strange and unfamiliar feeling. Peace. The kind that only comes when you stop asking for permission to exist. The next morning, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Texts. Missed calls. Voicemails. Emails with subject lines like, "Let's talk," and "What happened last night?" Some from cousins. Some from people who were at the wedding. Some from people who weren't. But heard about it within hours. Family trees have fast roots. And gossip travels quicker than truth. My mom's message was short. "You embarrassed us. I hope you're proud." My dad didn't bother texting. But he sent me a calendar invite. For a Zoom call. As if this was a quarterly check-in. Ryan's message came later. "I had no idea you felt that way. I wish you'd told me before doing that in front of everyone." I didn't reply. Because I had told him. Hundreds of times. Just never into a microphone. But buried among the noise were messages I didn't expect. From old classmates. From my Aunt Melissa. From even the wedding photographer. One read. "Thank you. That was the most honest thing I've seen at a wedding." It wasn't a scene. It was a statement. Another. "I saw you. I heard you. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up when I should have." And perhaps the most surprising of all. A message from Eliza. "I admire your strength. And I hope someday we can build something honest between us." I read it twice. And I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I was being seen not as the difficult one, but as the honest one. Weeks passed. And the wedding drama. It faded. At least in the family chat groups I'd long since muted. They went back to pretending. Holiday plans without my name on the list. Photos posted with captions like, "Family first." It didn't hurt. Not like it used to. Because I had finally stopped waiting for a seat at their table. Instead, I started building my own. Dinner with friends who checked in without an agenda. Weekend trips with people who didn't need me to perform politeness just to be welcome. Late nights with Jessica, talking about the future without tiptoeing around the past. I started seeing a therapist. Not because I was broken. But because I was ready to heal for real. To unravel all the lies I'd swallowed. To stop editing myself for comfort. To breathe in a life I didn't have to apologize for. I began sharing my story in small spaces. One-on-one conversations. A few online forums. People listened. And every time someone said, "Me too," it reminded me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one who had been minimized. Silenced. Sat in the corner like an afterthought. But I might have been one of the first to stand up and say it into a mic. It's funny, really. They sat me at the kids' table thinking they were making a point. And in a way, they did. Just not the one they intended. Because that night didn't break me. It built me. Not with applause. Not with vindication. But with truth. Truth I didn't need them to accept to make it real. Truth that gave me my voice. Not the quiet, polite one they raised me to use. But the one that shakes rooms. If you've ever been sat at the wrong table. Literally or metaphorically. Just know this. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to prove your worth to people who profit from your silence. You don't have to earn a chair in a room that never saw you. Build your own table. Set it with boundaries. Fill it with people who listen without conditions. Invite your whole self to sit down. And if you ever find yourself in a moment with a mic, or just a chance to speak, take it. Even if your voice shakes. Even if your family stares. Because the second you stop waiting for their permission, that's when your life truly begins.